And I would address a question or a comment is not a good word, but the question perhaps to our colleagues from UNESCO. I appreciated very much the way you have spoken about the Human Rights Declaration and what follows from it. And now, indeed, there's the need of freedom and another conditions, but it seems to me, and I want to address that to realize all that, there is one, at least one essential condition, that is that the education, which you have said, many say that education is the key for development, is the key in the end for understanding, for tolerance, for etc. etc. Yeah. So in other NGOs, many people speak about education as such. However, and I want that comment by our colleagues from UNESCO, is enough investment in the broadest sense of the word done in those regions where the needs are the highest? Is my question understandable?
The question is perfectly understandable. I'll be very cautious in answering it because I am not, and neither is Kostas, representatives of UNESCO's education sector, which, as you probably know, is the single most important sector of UNESCO's activities. But the answer to your question is clearly no. The Director General of UNESCO has gone on record very recently at the time of the G8 summit calling G8 countries to account for, among other things, failing to honor their commitments with respect not just to bilateral aid generally, but also specifically to the funding required to meet the goals of the Education for All program, which were defined as long ago as an international conference in Dakar in 1999, and for which UNESCO is the lead agency within the UN system, and which proposed, among other things, such core objectives as ensuring universal primary education for at least 5 years for girls in all countries. Those goals are unlikely to be fully met, and the fact that they're unlikely to be fully met is no doubt not entirely about the absence of money, but the failure to provide resources where they're most needed is certainly not helping in achieving goals that the international community for the last 10 years has recognized as a priority and that UNESCO is doing its best to try to implement.
Okay, yes, okay.
I have a question.
Raúl Constantino, I think...
If I may add also... Very briefly, if I may add to what John just said, there is another element that is very important in relation to education, which has been ignored or has been given lesser importance, and that is the quality of education. Not only there are fewer resources than agreed and committed from the international community in terms of providing material resources in education, providing the institutions, providing the curricula, etc., but there has been lesser attention and fewer resources invested in terms of developing a curricula that responds to the needs of the persons participating in the education process, fewer resources in making sure that human rights education is an integral part of the educational system all over the world.
Okay. Patricia, I have a question. Patricia.
Yeah, if I may, I would like to put a question to Jimmy Wales. You have mentioned that Wikimedia is neutral and away from controversy. Of course, this is possible in some issues, but in other issues, like the one we are talking about, human rights, it is impossible for you to be unbiased. So I suppose that being neutral is only in some controversial areas. Am I right?
Well, in any area, what we try to do when there is a legitimate controversy, what we try to do is, in the Wikipedia entry on that subject, is to describe what the controversy is about, so people can understand what the controversy is about, and to try to use language that is very calm. You try to, as a good writer, you want to avoid heavily value-laden terminology and words and condemnation. You simply want to describe what is as best you possibly can. Of course, this is very difficult, and we don't have any magical formula for doing this, but it works far better than I would have ever imagined. And in fact, in many cases, when we do have a deeply controversial area, our work ends up being quite good, because people who are on different sides of the issue come together and really work hard to hammer out the details of how to write it in such a way that everyone can accept this is at least a discussion of what the controversy is.
Thank you. Okay. So back to you, Patricia, afterwards.
Thank you. Only I will add a very short phrase from the UNESCO Constitution. I will give the microphone to Stefan Parmentier here, and we start the second round of speakers. What UNESCO states is ignorance of each other's ways and life has been often a cause of suspicion and mistrust between the peoples of the world. Because of that, what is important of education is that education is the best remedy against ignorance. And that is not only on a scientific level, it's at moral level. And I think because of that, Wikipedia is a wonderful example of universality of knowledge and wisdom by diversity. And I think in particular on the indigenous peoples, we have Wikipedia in native languages, and that is a good example of convergence between the different groups towards universal or shared norms and values. And I appreciate very much the Wikipedia, not only at scientific level or artistic, informative level, but also for the promotion of the principles of UNESCO, such as cultural diversity.